Welcome. Today I want to talk to you about further reading. I have some books here assembled that I want to share with you. I'm going to put the titles and the authors in a separate kind of written thing to you in an announcement when I send this video out. So don't worry if you can't understand what I'm saying about the titles and the authors, because I will make sure that you have the correct titles and authors in your hands. Um, the first book I want to talk about is a book you won't be able to get because it's a really old 1920s book about color theory. But I want to share it with you and show it to you because I love that this book has been created in the very same way that we are experiencing this class in color theory by making these little color chips of color made of gouache on paper. That was awkward. Anyway, The Theory and Practice of Color by Bonnie Snow and Hugo Froelich. This book is totally crumbling apart, and so I'll try to get it open to a page to show you what I'm talking about. Here we go. Try to hold it up without it falling apart on me. It does not have plates or printed colors in the sense that books do today. These are actually pieces of separate paper that have been painted with gouache and pasted down to show you these colors. And you can see how bright and vibrant they are, right? They wouldn't have changed much because there's an overleaf here, like a piece of tissue paper in between to protect them. And they've transferred a little. You can kind of see that ghost. They wouldn't have changed much because the book stays shut, right? So light doesn't really reach the pages. Some colors are fugitive, which means that they fade or change in light. Anyway, I really love the idea that someone was sitting around making all these perfectly flat, beautiful little pieces of paper covered with gouache paint and then pasting them in so carefully. Anyway, so that is what an old book about color theory would look like. But let's look at a much more contemporary book, a much more sturdy book at this point. It's still, the pages are still in this one. This is Color, a Workshop for Artists and Designers by David A. Or is his name A? No, David Horman. Sorry, I thought he had a middle initial A. This is a really useful book. I think of all the books I show you today, that at the point of studying color theory, this is the most useful. For one thing, he has beautiful projects in here. We're going to do one or two of them. If you were to do all the projects in this, you can kind of just, you don't need anybody to interpret it for you. It's meant kind of as a class. It's meant as a workshop, right? If you were to do all these assignments, you would be really quite experienced and expert at color theory. It has a beautiful glossary in the back that is illustrated, right? So you can look up when you're wondering, wait, what does that one mean again? It's also written in a real, like, real understandable style, right? There's not a lot of jargon and plenty of beautiful illustrations. So this is a great book to have, and I don't require it, but if you're interested and you want to kind of enhance your experience or do further projects, this would be a great book to have. Okay. Next, we have one of the color theorists that I speak to you about in our section, our week about color theory. Color theorists. I have a couple of them. I have Joseph Albers' book, The Interaction of Color. This is a very classic book. You will hear this work referred to very often. And it also has illustrations, and these are great projects to do. Also, we're going to do a couple of them. So I have some bookmarks stuck in that. It's not quite as, I guess, approachable in terms of the writing style as David Horman. It's quite a bit older for one thing. So it's more as a more formal language for one thing. But I think this is a great book, and I think that this has been I think it's made, the projects in here have been made available in some kind of website format. And I'll see if I can find that and send that to you too. Okay, so that's Joseph Albers' Interaction of Color. Next, we have Goethe's book, The Theory of Colors. And this doesn't have there's a couple of drawings in the middle, but it's kind of a bust in terms of pictures. But this is the one that I tell you I think is so poetic. And so I'm just going to read a little bit right out of it. Okay. People experience a great delight in color. Generally, the eye requires it as much as it requires light. We have only to remember the refreshing sensation we experience if on a cloudy day the sun illumines a single portion of the scene before us and displays its colors. That healing powers were ascribed to colored gems may have arisen from the experience of this indefinable pleasure. Right? So he's saying that 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 color really changes your mood, like affects you, right? And his writing is all like that, sort of flowery and very poetic and very enjoyable. So that's Goethe's book on colors. Okay, and I think I mentioned before that a lot of the stuff that he's presenting as empirical science is we've decided is it's been disproved. Let's say that, but it's still a very enjoyable book. Okay, then we have an interesting reproduction of a book that would have been from 1820 or 1850. I'm not sure. Called Werner's Nomenclature of Colors. Now, the way this book works, and there's a kind of an overleaf, a flyleaf with some colors on it. You take that off. This is an exact replica of a book that scientists would have taken with them on journeys, and they would refer to these particular colors in order to communicate with you which color they meant. It was sort of meant to kind of standardize, right? Colors. And I'll just read you one. Plum purple. So it doesn't just have a little printed example of it. It also has a written description of what plum purple would be. The plum blue of Werner, as composed of Berlin blue with much carmine red, a very little brown, and an almost imperceptible portion of black. Now, isn't this like a funny recipe? I wonder if I gave that out to you, just those instructions, how different the colors we might get would be. Maybe they'd be very similar. Anyway, this is a kind of a fun book. It's not super instructional, that's for sure. It's just one of these books that's enjoyable to look at. Okay, so that is Werner's Nomenclature Color. Lastly, I guess if there were two books you were gonna get, it'd probably be that first one, the Horning book, not the antique book. This book, super useful. And then this book, and this is both useful and enjoyable. This is The Secret Life of Colors by Cassius St. Clair. And I love this book so much that I sent copies to friends, not just people that were interested in color. I think it's a great book for anybody. For one thing, it's a really nice volume. It has these great little colored polka dots on the front. I'm very partial to polka dots. And look at this. Look at how you can like flip the edges and you get all those beautiful colors going by. So what is this book? This book is a kind of history of pigments and their names and why we came to associate them with those things. And it's kind of a little bit like color trivia, if you will. Like here's one here. This is an example of what it's meant to be. This is Mountbatten pink, which is not a pink that we know very well right now. But you do know, I think, fluorescent pink is in here too. And there's some little known color names. Well, at this point, they're less known, let's say that. There's one in here called Dragon's Blood. And I will try to find that and show it to you because it's just one you don't run into. Dragon's Blood. We would call that like a burgundy or something like that. Or even, I don't know, maybe rose madder or alizarin crimson. Anyway, this book is fun to read. You don't have to read it in order. You could just say, well, today I feel like checking out something about the color saffron. Or I think I feel like reading about Isabelline. Now, Isabelline you can barely see here because it's so much like white, right? It's like a white color. The color puce, which is a really hilarious color name because it's meant to be, I think, to look like fleas. Puce is the French word for flea, I believe. And why that became a color name is in here. So there's all kinds of really diverting and interesting reading in here that won't necessarily make your painting better, but it's certainly fun to read about these colors. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to put these names and titles into a document that will be coming to you with this film, so you can look into them further if you like. Again, you're not required to look for these books or to read them or to even think about them again. They're just there for people that kind of want to do some further reading about it. That's all.